We've just learned some very sad news, the passing of an American icon, Muhammad Ali, the larger-than-life boxing legend, has died at the age of 74.
What if the greatest fighter the world has ever known didn't die with a knockout, but with a whisper?
The most important sportsman in the history of America.
What if his final match didn't happen in the ring, but in a hospital room filled with silence, prayer, and a heart that refused to quit? This is not just the story of Muhammad Ali's death. It's the story of how, even in stillness, he fought harder than ever before. This video traces the brutal last hours of Muhammad Ali, a man whose legacy loomed large and whose spirit didn't go quietly. The final appearance. It was April 9th, 2016, a day that seemed ordinary to many, yet carried the weight of history in the quiet halls of the JW Marriott Desert Ridge Resort in Phoenix, Arizona. The evening air outside was warm but gentle, carrying a calm that contrasted with the anticipation humming softly inside the grand ballroom. Tonight was the annual gala for the Muhammad Ali Parkinson Center, a gathering of supporters, friends, and admirers, coming together to honor not just a cause, but the man behind it, Muhammad Ali. For decades, Ali had been a towering figure, not only in the boxing ring, but in the hearts of millions around the globe. His charisma, his unyielding spirit, his poetic defiance in the face of adversity, he was a living legend. But now, Parkinson's disease had diminished the man who once seemed invincible. The disease had stolen his voice, his swift movements, his impish smile, leaving behind a shadow of the warrior who once danced so gracefully on his feet. The crowd fell into a hush as he was wheeled in. Time seemed to slow. The room, filled with the soft murmur of well-wishers, suddenly felt sacred, almost reverent. Ali was dressed simply but impeccably in a black suit, his dark sunglasses shielding his eyes that had grown tired over the years. His body sat almost motionless, supported carefully in the wheelchair, hands resting quietly on the armrests, neither clenched in anger nor restless with nervous energy, just stillness. A profound stillness that held the weight of a lifetime of battles, both inside and outside the ring. It was clear to everyone present that this was no longer the man who once danced and taunted opponents with effortless bravado. This was a man enduring his legacy, fighting a new kind of battle far from the roar of the crowds and the flashing cameras. For years, his presence at these fundraisers had been a source of inspiration and energy, a reminder of resilience and hope. But in 2014 and 2015, he had been too frail to attend. Tonight was different. This was a quiet, somber farewell. No speeches filled the air. There was no booming Ali laugh, no poetic chant. Instead, he gave a subtle nod to the audience, an almost imperceptible gesture that spoke volumes to those who had followed his journey. And yet, the crowd rose. A wave of standing ovations swept through the room, carried by decades of admiration, respect, and love. It was the final standing ovation of Muhammad Ali's life, a moment frozen in time, a powerful farewell to a man who had touched the world in immeasurable ways. The illness begins. Then came Monday, May 30th, 2016, the day that marked the beginning of the end. For years, Muhammad Ali had lived with the invisible chains of Parkinson's disease. It was a cruel condition, not just robbing him of his athletic prowess, but attacking fundamental functions, his breathing, his voice, the simple acts of swallowing and speaking. Over time, these symptoms waxed and waned, often hidden behind the tough exterior that had once dominated boxing arenas worldwide. But on this particular Monday, something shifted. The subtle changes grew more alarming. Ali's breathing became labored. Each breath felt like a battle in itself. His chest tightened painfully, a constriction that no amount of willpower could overcome. Yet there was no dramatic moment, no sudden collapse on the floor, no frantic rush to the emergency room with sirens blaring through the streets. Instead, there was only a quiet, somber realization among his family and caretakers that something was wrong, and that it was serious. His doctors quickly advised that he be admitted to Honor Health Scottsdale Osborne Medical Center. That night, Ali was brought in, classified as being in fair condition. There was a cautious optimism among those who loved him, a hope that this was just another respiratory infection, a temporary setback. After all, Ali had survived so much more. His family's spokesman, Bob Gunnell, publicly echoed this hope, reassuring the world. "We expected him to bounce back. Muhammad has battled back many times before. We expected it to happen this time." Yet behind those words, the truth was more complicated. Beneath the surface of hope, an uneasy worry settled in. Because this time, Ali was not responding to treatment as he had in the past. The fight inside him, so fierce and enduring, was beginning to dim. The world's greatest boxer was facing his toughest opponent yet, a relentless disease that showed no mercy, a history of fading. For over 30 years, Muhammad Ali had been fighting battles far more daunting than any opponent in the boxing ring. His greatest challenge was not one of skill or speed, but of endurance against a relentless enemy within his own body. It was in 1984 that the world first heard from Ali himself the devastating news that he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's syndrome. This revelation came only 3 years after his retirement from the sport that had defined him, the sport where he had once electrified millions with his lightning-fast reflexes and poetic bravado. At first, the symptoms crept in with subtlety. The hands that had once floated like butterflies now trembled imperceptibly, almost like a whispered secret of the disease's arrival. His signature quick footwork, once a dance of power and precision, became hesitant, the rhythm faltering as if time itself slowed around him. His voice, which had roared across packed arenas and global airwaves, softened gradually until it was almost a ghost of its former thunder. As the years passed, the disease's grip tightened. In 2014, Ali faced a serious bout of pneumonia that landed him in the hospital. Though he fought through it, his recovery was a shadow of his former resilience. The following year, a urinary tract infection again threatened his fragile health. Each time he emerged, the strength that had once made him the greatest was a little more diminished. Family and friends, who had watched the slow unraveling, whispered quietly about the man who once shook up the world, now struggling simply to swallow food. His speech had all but vanished, replaced by silence and whispers. The invincible fighter's frame was shrinking, retreating as if trying to conserve every ounce of energy. Yet, through all of this, there remained one thing that Parkinson's could not claim: Ali's indomitable will, his spirit, the essence that had carried him through decades of triumphs and trials, flickered stubbornly, refusing to be extinguished. That tenacity was a beacon for those around him, a reminder that the man was still fighting, even if the body betrayed him. Behind closed doors. The medical team worked steadily, their conversations shifting to softer, more cautious language. Treatments were altered and increased, attempts made to sustain his failing organs and to ease the struggle for each breath. Mechanical supports for breathing were heightened, yet no measure reversed the inexorable slide toward decline. In this fragile environment, a moment came, a quiet, private moment when the doctors chose to speak plainly to Lonnie Ali, his wife and steadfast companion through more than 3 decades of love and loyalty. The words were simple but heavy with gravity. His condition isn't going to improve. Lonnie met the news with a calm she had learned over years of hardship, but inside, a deep well of sorrow stirred. She had witnessed the slow ebbing of her husband's vitality over decades, a gradual dimming of the man who had once lit up the world. But this was a different kind of knowing. This was final. Word was sent out, a chain of delicate communications to family members near and far. Some were able to arrive quickly, others had to board planes and rush across miles, each carrying the weight of what the summons implied. There were no distractions, no outsiders permitted. Cameras and reporters were kept away from this most sacred space. It was a sanctuary of grief and love. The circle around Muhammad Ali grew smaller, tighter, more intimate. The people who mattered most gathered in quiet solidarity, each holding their breath in that room where history and humanity converged. The end was near. The circle narrows. On the quiet Friday of June 3, 2016, the hospital itself seemed to hold its breath. Outside Muhammad Ali's room, a gathering of close friends formed, each sharing in a collective silence heavy with unspoken fears. They lingered in the waiting area, a mix of familiar faces from decades of friendship and loyalty, many of them unable to pass the threshold and enter the private sanctuary where Ali lay. Among them was John Ramsey, a man whose bond with Ali spanned years and countless memories shared in their hometown of Louisville. He had come only after a call from Lonnie, another close confidant, urging him to be near. But even Ramsey knew some moments were too sacred, too intimate for intrusion. It was a very private matter, he reflected later, the words carrying the weight of respect and sorrow. Inside the room, the atmosphere was both tender and tense. Ali's children had gathered, forming a protective circle around the man who had once been the embodiment of strength and unyielding spirit. Hannah, Mariam, Rashida, and Layla, each one silently wrestling with the impending loss, their faces a mix of hope and heartbreak. The rhythmic beeping of the monitors punctuated the stillness, a steady reminder of life's fragile thread. Ali's chest rose and fell in faint, uneven patterns, the breaths shallow but persistent. His skin, once vibrant and full of life, had paled to an almost translucent shade. His eyes remained closed, the eyelids resting gently, as if shielding him from the weight of the world. The room was filled not with noise, but with whispers, soft, reverent, almost sacred in their quietness. One by one, his children reached out to him, their hands, once holding the power to shake stadiums with a simple gesture of fury and defiance, now trembled as they gently clasped his own. They pressed tender kisses to his forehead, the warmth of their lips a silent promise, a goodbye, or perhaps a prayer. Their voices, hushed and fragile, whispered secrets and love into ears that may or may not have been listening. The man who had commanded the world with his voice, his presence, now lay motionless, surrounded by the gentle murmurs of those who loved him most. Yet despite the stillness, the monitors told a story of quiet perseverance. Still, his heart kept going, steadily, defiantly, against every expectation. The final battle. Sepsis is a stealthy and merciless adversary. It begins unassumingly, often mistaken for a normal infection. But once it takes hold, it becomes a battle that the body wages against itself. The immune system, in an overzealous effort to defend, unleashes a storm that spirals out of control. Cells meant to protect begin to attack vital organs, blood pressure plummets, and the fragile balance of life begins to unravel. Consciousness dims. The body fades. For Muhammad Ali, this brutal battle came swiftly, unexpectedly. What began as a respiratory infection escalated rapidly into full-blown septic shock. The strength that had once powered his legendary boxing career was now locked in a fight no human body could easily win. One after another, the essential organs began to fail. His lungs, once resilient and mighty, faltered and stopped clearing oxygen. The kidneys ceased their relentless task of filtering the blood. The liver, the body's silent workhorse, gave out. The machines beeped warnings. The doctors worked frantically. But Ali held on, gripping the last threads of life with an iron will. For 30 minutes, longer than anyone dared hope, his heart continued to beat. Not weakly, as if flickering out like a dying flame. Not sporadically, as if uncertain or fading. No, his heart beat deliberately, with steady purpose. It was a pulse that spoke not of medical intervention or machinery, but of sheer human willpower. It was something no medicine could replicate, no doctor's command. It was a testament to a spirit that had never been broken, a force stronger than disease, stronger than fate. This was Muhammad Ali's final stand, the last fight of his extraordinary life. Until, at last, even that incredible force met its match. The beating slowed, the rhythm faltered, and then, silence. The goodbye. At exactly 9:10 p.m. Mountain Time on June 3, 2016, the world lost Muhammad Ali. In that still, sacred moment, surrounded by the hushed presence of his family, he slipped away quietly. There was no sudden gasp, no flurry of frantic movements or desperate breaths. Instead, a gentle stillness fell over the room, a soft, definitive silence that marked the end of a life that had roared louder than most. His family encircled him like a fortress of love and faith. The air was thick with the reverence of an Islamic prayer, low and rhythmic, weaving through the room like a tender lullaby. His children, voices trembling yet firm, chanted softly, not with sorrow, but with deep respect and acceptance. "You can go now. We will be okay. You can go back to God now." These words, simple and profound, were whispered as though releasing him gently from the burdens of a body that had carried so much. They reached out with hands that trembled and steadied in turns. Fingers traced the contours of his skin, now fragile, yet still warm. They kissed his cheeks with a mixture of love and farewell, the press of their foreheads against his speaking volumes in silent language. Tears welled up in some eyes, flowing freely with the weight of a lifetime of memories and unspoken goodbyes. Others held their composure, channeling the strength that Muhammad Ali himself had embodied throughout his extraordinary life. Every person there understood the magnitude of what had been lost, not just a champion, but a spirit, a symbol, a force. Hannah, his daughter, later reflected on this moment with a poignant observation. His heart wouldn't stop beating for 30 minutes, a true testament to the strength of his spirit and will. That endurance, even as life slipped away, was a final echo of the legendary resilience that defined him. It was as if, even in death, his body refused to surrender until his spirit was fully ready to take its leave. The world stands still. Almost instantly, the news shattered the silence of the world. Muhammad Ali dead at 74. Those words flashed like lightning across news tickers and screens worldwide, gripping every corner of the globe. From dedicated sports networks to the highest-profile national broadcasts, every outlet bore the same somber announcement: the greatest was gone. The tributes began to pour in with a tidal force that no one could ignore. Former presidents offered solemn statements. Fellow athletes spoke with a mixture of awe and heartbreak. Entire nations declared moments of remembrance, honoring the man who transcended boxing to become a symbol of courage, conviction, and change. In Ali's hometown of Louisville, Kentucky, streets glowed with memorial lights. Murals seemed to appear overnight on buildings, capturing his unmistakable visage in bold colors. Flags were lowered in mourning across cities and countries, a visual testament to the void his passing left. Yet, within the quiet confines of the hospital room, a different scene unfolded. There were no grand speeches, no proclamations of farewell broadcast to the world. The family remained inwardly focused, their hands clasped tightly, their shared grief a silent communion. In this private sanctuary, words seemed both unnecessary and impossible to find. They simply held on to each other, their presence a quiet testament to love and loss. Outside, friends who had traveled from far-flung places lingered at respectful distances. They understood the sacredness of that moment and chose not to intrude. The weight of the room's gravity was palpable, a boundary that even the closest companions honored with silence. Inside lay a man who had taken on the world with unmatched ferocity, whose voice and fists had shaken arenas and hearts alike. Now he had finally laid it down, his battle over, his legacy sealed, and the world forever changed by the man who once said, "Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee." The greatest was no longer among the living, but his spirit would continue to echo through generations, forever immortal. The champion's farewell. They brought him home at last, back to the city that had shaped him, that had watched a young boy with big dreams grow into a man who would change the world. The journey was solemn, accompanied by 3 off-duty police officers who honored the gravity of their charge. It was more than just a body they carried on that flight to Louisville. It was the weight of a legacy, a story woven into the very fabric of the city. His family flew alongside, hearts heavy, hands clenched in silent prayer. As the plane touched down, word spread quickly. The streets of Louisville, once familiar paths for a determined 12-year-old boy running to the gym, now awaited the final procession of their hometown hero. Crowds gathered early, braving the sun and the lingering heat of early summer, lining every corner and sidewalk with quiet reverence. Some people brought flowers, their petals fragile yet vibrant, falling softly onto the pavement as a symbol of love and loss. Others wept openly, the depth of their grief a testament to the profound impact one man had on millions. It was a moment of collective mourning and celebration, a farewell worthy of a champion whose fights had extended far beyond the ring. On June 10th, the city came together in the Yum Center, a vast arena filled with thousands who came to pay their respects. The atmosphere was thick with emotion. Voices rose and fell as former President Bill Clinton stepped to the podium, his words reflecting on a life of courage and conviction. Comedian Billy Crystal offered a heartfelt tribute, weaving humor and admiration in a way only he could, reminding the world of the joy Muhammad Ali had brought. Bryant Gumbel's eulogy echoed with deep respect, recalling the man behind the legend. Yet, amidst all the speeches, the grand tributes, none could capture the profound stillness that settled during the family's vigil. The silence spoke louder than any words ever could. Later, at Cave Hill Cemetery, the final chapter was written beneath the shade of ancient trees that swayed gently in the Kentucky breeze. His casket, adorned simply and humbly, was laid to rest in the ground that had witnessed so much of his journey. Here, in this sacred space, the world paused to breathe alongside him. One last breath of Kentucky air, one final moment of peace. The champion's farewell was complete, yet his spirit lingered, woven into the whispers of the leaves and the quiet hum of the earth itself. The spirit that refused to fall. Muhammad Ali had never been just a boxer. He was more than a voice raised in protest, more than a symbol of resilience and change. He was a force of nature, a storm contained in a tailored suit, a fighter whose battles transcended physical blows. For decades, he shouted at the world, defying odds, expectations, and injustice. But as Parkinson's disease took hold, silencing his body and muting his voice, Ali learned to fight in new ways, through presence, through quiet dignity, through sheer will. Though Parkinson had stolen much from him, it never broke the core of who he was. When the world thought he was gone, his heart continued its rhythm, thumping on for 30 minutes after the rest of his body surrendered. That unyielding beat was a final testament to a spirit that refused to fall. Even when his fists could no longer strike and his voice could no longer roar, the essence of the greatest endured. His daughter Miriam captured this truth perfectly. "My father no longer struggles," she wrote. "He is in a better place. God is the greatest." In those words lies a peace born from pain, a release from the relentless fight. Yet even as the world mourned, there was an undeniable truth rising from the silence. Muhammad Ali, the greatest, never truly falls. He simply moves beyond the ring, into legend, into memory, into the hearts of all who believe that courage, love, and spirit can never be defeated. If you had the chance to say one last thing to Muhammad Ali, what would it be? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching this video with us, and catch you in the next one.